It is time for the Salem Church of Christ message with Jason Love, their minister. Church is located at 1700 South Main Street right here in Salem. And here's the message from Brother Jason Love.
Now, today's sermon, we're going to be talking about my last name, the more excellent way. My last name is Love. It's just a little joke, but we're talking about the more excellent way. So today, to start out the sermon, we're going to be in 1 Corinthians chapter 13, okay? Before we get started, about the church at Corinth, we talked a little bit a couple weeks ago about chapter 12. And as we know, the church in Corinth, we have a pretty young church in an area that's very vibrant, a very big town for the standards of people down there. And we had a lot of people being converted to Christianity that were joining the church. So we had a lot of new members within the early church that didn't have much knowledge and that were struggling, obviously, that had issues, that struggled with fleshly desires. They struggled with pride, they struggled with envy, struggled with a lot of things that we struggle with now. And I'm just so very grateful for these letters because it really helps us out today. And it really means a lot to us today. So to start out this lesson, we're going to be in 1 Corinthians chapter 13. Verse 1. Though I speak with the tongues of men and of angels, but have not love, I have become sounding brass or a clanging cymbal. And though I have the gift of prophecy and understand all mysteries and all knowledge, and though I have all faith so that I can remove mountains, but have not love, I am nothing. And though I bestow all my goods to feed the poor, and though I give my body to be burned, but have not love, it profits me nothing. Verse 4. Love suffers long and is kind. Love does not envy. Love does not parade itself, is not puffed up. Verse 5. Does not behave rudely, does not seek its own, is not provoked, thinks no evil, does not rejoice in iniquity, but rejoices in the truth, bears all things, believes all things, hopes all things, and endures all things. Now, one thing I want to look at very quick is in verse 2. And we know in the church of Corinth that they were having a lot of blessings from the Spirit. They needed it back in those days. They needed prophecy. They needed to speak in tongues. They needed those things to be able to establish the early church. But look at the importance that Paul puts on those compared to love. And though I have the gift of prophecy, and understand all mysteries and all knowledge, and though I have all faith, what is faith to us? Faith is one of the most important things we can have. It's necessary. If we have enough faith to move a mountain, but have not love, what? We are nothing. And though I bestow all my goods, we go through all the acts, we feed the poor, we give our body to be burned, we do everything we can for the church, but if we do not have love, it profits us nothing. Love is everlasting, just like the love of God. It suffers long, is it kind. It does not envy. It has no pride. It does not parade itself. It does not say, look at me. And it's not puffed up. Does not behave rudely. Does not seek its own. Is not provoked. Thinks no evil. Does not rejoice in iniquity, but rejoices in the truth. Bear all things, believe all things, hope all things, and endure all things. We know the love that God for us is everlasting. It is not going to end. It bears all things, believes all things, hopes all things, and endures all things. Verse 8. Love never fails. Whether there are prophecies, they will fail. Whether there are tongues, they will cease. Whether there is knowledge, it will vanish away. For we know in part, and we prophesy in part. But when that which is imperfect has come, then that which is in part will be done away. Now think about maybe being a part of the early church in Corinth. And you see all these miracles happening from the Spirit. You see prophecy. You see speaking in tongues. You see healings, whatever the case may be. And you start thinking in your heart, like, I want to speak in tongues. I think speaking in tongues is the coolest thing ever. I want to prophesy. Like, where's my part? And like we talked about a couple weeks ago, we all play a crucial part in the church. But what is Paul saying here about love? That love is more important than all of those things. Love is more important than prophecy. It's more important than speaking in tongues. Whether there is knowledge, it will vanish away. But what will not vanish away is love. Love never fails. In verse 11. When I was a child, I spoke as a child. I understood as a child. I thought as a child. But when I became a man, I put away childish things. For now we see in a mirror dimly, but then face to face. Now I know in part, but then I shall know just as I also am known. And now abide faith, hope, love, these three. But the greatest of these is love. Now I believe verse 11 is a very powerful verse. It's a verse that I like to go back to a lot in my own studies. And it says, when I was a child, I spoke as a child. I understood as a child. I acted as a child. I struggled with my flesh. But as I became a man, I put away childish things. Verse 13, now abide faith, hope, love, these three, but the greatest of these is what? It's love. That's powerful. What is Paul saying? The greatest of these, hope, faith. The greatest of these things is love. Now I know it can be easy sometimes to have love for our family members, have love for our spouses, love for people around us, love for people in our church body. That can be easy. But on the Sermon on the Mount, Jesus talked about something very important. So we're going to go to Matthew chapter 5, verse 43. You have heard that it was said, you shall love your neighbor and hate your enemy. But I say to you, love your enemies. Bless those who curse you. Do good to those who hate you. And pray for those who spitefully use you and persecute you, that you may be sons of your Father in heaven. For he makes his sun rise on the evil and on the good, and sends rain on the just and on the unjust. So you know Jesus Christ in this moment, he's talking the Sermon on the Mount. He's speaking to a group of Jews. And he's telling them, you've heard that it's been said, you shall love your neighbor and hate your enemy. But I'm going to make this even more difficult. I'm going to tell you the better way. But I say to you, love your enemy, bless those who curse you, do good to those who hate you, and pray for those who spitefully use you and persecute you. Is that difficult? That could be very difficult, right? Very, very difficult. But one part here that I really like to look at, he makes the sun rise on the evil and on the good, and sends rain on the just and on the unjust. Now when I read that, I look at it like he's comparing all of us together, right? That we're all going to be rained on, right? We're all going to have good days. We're all going to have bad days. You know, as we see people within the church body today or people out in other church bodies, we're all struggling. We're all struggling with something, whether it's physical with an ailment, or maybe it's spiritual, or maybe it's mental, whatever the case may be. We have something going on in our lives that is difficult. And based on where we came from, based on our lives and how we were raised, we've made decisions that have put us in where we're at today. And when we have more decisions to make, we make those decisions based on our lives. And it's easy to see others and think, well, if I was in that position, I would choose differently. I would make a different decision, or I would do something other than that. But at the end of the day, we don't walk in other people's shoes. We only walk in our own. And we might run into a lot of issues. We might run into people that we might grow hatred towards. Or we might have problems with. We might run into people that have done things against us that we cannot forgive. But in verse 44, but I say to you, love your enemies. Bless those who curse you. Do good to those who hate you. And pray for those who spitefully use you and persecute you. As we go back to what Paul said in Corinthians, what is love? Love is more important than faith. Love is more important than hope. And love endures all and is never ending, just like the love of our Heavenly Father. Verse 46, for if you love those who love you, what reward do you have? Do not even the tax collectors do the same? And if you greet your brethren only, what do you do more than others? Do not even the tax collectors do so? Now we understand the representation of the tax collector, right? In Matthew and in the Gospels, the tax collectors, obviously they were collecting tax, and they were stealing more tax than what they should be taking. And they weren't really keeping it for themselves, but they were giving it to their masters, the people who would send them out to do it. And they would look down. Everyone would look down as the tax collector, and they represent the tax collector as a sinner. Right? It's saying even the low of the low is what they're trying to represent here. For if we love those who love you, what reward have you? Do not even the tax collectors do the same, the low of the low? And if you greet your brethren only, what do you do more than others? Do not even the tax collectors do so? Now it's very easy, brothers and sisters, to love those who love us. That's easy. But what's hard? Verse 44 is hard. It's very hard. And we all struggle with it. I struggle with it as well. Let's go ahead and go to Matthew 18. We're going to read verse 21 through 35. Verse 21. And Peter came to him and said, Lord, how often shall my brother sin against me and I forgive him? Up to 7 times? Jesus said to him, I do not say to you up to 7 times, but up to 70 times 7. Now what was Jesus saying here? Was he saying there's an actual number where we stop forgiving? No, he was trying to give them such a big number that it would be unfathomable that they would be able to hit that, right? It's not about keeping a list and being like, okay, he's at 125. He has till 563, and then I got to stop forgiving him. No. He was saying a number that you cannot fathom. That's how many times you have to forgive your brethren. And then verse 23. Therefore the kingdom of heaven is like a certain king who wanted to settle accounts with his servants. Now right now, Jesus is about to talk about a parable. Now a parable is an earthly story that has a godly meaning, right? So this story did not actually happen. It's just a story, right? It's a story that Jesus is going to give us to help us understand godly things or heavenly things. So a lot of times when we're in parables, when it talks about a king or a master or a ruler, it's talking about God. If it's talking about a servant, if it's talking about, someone who's under that master, it is talking about us, right? Then make sure I do not get lost here. 23. Therefore, the kingdom of heaven is like a certain king who wanted to settle accounts with his servants. And when he had begun to settle accounts, one was brought to him who owed him 10,000 talents. Now, 10,000 talents is about 375 tons of silver. Now, if we want to get technical here, we're talking hundreds of millions of actual U.S. dollars. 25. But as he was not able to pay, his master commanded that he be sold with his wife and children and all that he had, and that payment be made. The servant therefore fell down before him, saying, Master, have patience with me, and I will pay you all. Then the master of that servant was moved with compassion, released him, and forgave him the debt. Verse 28. But that servant went out and found one of his fellow servants who owed him 100 denarii. Now, 100 denarii would be probably roughly 4 months' pay for a servant. It's about $6,000. So, substantial amount of money maybe to that servant. But in comparison to what he owed the master, it was nothing. Literally nothing. But that servant went out and found one of his fellow servants who owed him 100 denarii. And he laid hands on him and took him by the throat, saying, Pay me what you owe. So his fellow servant fell down at his feet and begged him, saying, Have patience with me, and I will pay you all. And he would not, but went and threw him into prison till he could pay the debt. So when his fellow servants saw what had been done, they were very grieved, and came and told their master all that had been done. Then his master, after he had called him, said to him, You wicked servant, I forgave you all the debt because you begged me. Should you not also have had compassion on your fellow servant, just as I had pity on you? And his master was angry, and delivered him to the torturers, until he should pay all that was due to him. 35. So my heavenly Father also will do to you, if each of you from his heart does not forgive his brother his trespasses. Now, brothers and sisters, what can we learn from this parable for us today? First off, we are eternally indebted to our Heavenly Father, a price that we cannot pay. I believe sometimes we view the debts that maybe other people owe to us as greater than that, as something we will not let go. We view the trespasses that somebody's done against us as something greater than the trespasses we have done against our Heavenly Father. Has our Heavenly Father forgave us? Has He given us the opportunity to be with Him? He gave us His Son, Jesus Christ, the perfect sacrifice. Now, I know it's hard to forgive, and it's hard to love the people that persecute us. Maybe some of us have people very close to us, I know I do, that you can't seem to understand why they do what they do or what they've done to you. And it's unfathomable to be able to get over that hurdle. But we have to understand that love is never failing, the love from God. Now, even though it is difficult, just as Jesus said Himself, it's something that we must do. We must be able to let go. We must be able to forgive. We learn from what's going on, and we become better. Now, like I said before, when the rain falls on everybody, and the sun rises for everybody, I used to tell myself a lot of times, I'm only 3 steps away from being homeless at all times. Because there could be 3 things that happen in my life that I don't know how to handle. 3 terrible incidences that happened to me or my family that I might not be able to cope with. I'd look at people close to me that might struggle with addiction, and I'd be like, well, I'm not an addict, one, because I've never tried the drug. And I see them and I see where they're at, and I say, well, I don't understand how they got there. I would never get there. I would make a different decision. I would do something better. But at the end of the day, we don't know. We don't know. We're only here because we've made decisions to be here. We've been presented with opportunity in our lives. And we've made good decisions and we've made bad decisions. And I bet a lot of us are grateful here for the people that have forgiven us our trespasses against them. But remember this. The greatest debt we've ever owed is to our Heavenly Father. And He has given us the greatest form of forgiveness. And that is His Son, Jesus Christ. In Luke 23, verse 32. Now, forgiveness, I believe, is one of the most important things. And when I look at some of the last words Jesus ever said before He died, we look at Luke 23. 32, there were also 2 other criminals led with Him to be put to death. And when they had come to the place called Calvary, there they crucified Him. And the criminals, one on the right hand and the other on the left. Verse 34. Then Jesus said, Father, forgive them, for they do not know what they do. Brothers and sisters, it is important that we forgive, that we learn from what we've gone through this life and we become better. We become more like more like Jesus Christ. We become that even though what we're going through right now, we might not understand how we're going to get through it. Or we might not understand how we're going to be able to forgive others. But once we do, I can testify that we will become stronger, that we will be able to learn, that we will be beacons of light for others around us. Now, I've only lived my life, and I don't know the lives that you all have lived, but I know what the Scriptures say. The Scriptures say that the love of God is never failing. I know that He loves every single one of us. He loves every person outside these doors. And it's up to us to forgive. It's up to us to have love, to have compassion, to have empathy, as our Heavenly Father had compassion and empathy for us. Brothers and sisters, if there's anybody in the congregation, member of this church, that's been struggling, that's had some things come up in their lives and they don't know how they're going to be able to get through it, or maybe they've fallen away from the gospel and are ready to come back within our arms and ask for forgiveness, or if there's anybody out there that isn't a Christian, that feels the inkling of the Spirit within their heart and wants to follow the gospel of Jesus Christ by repenting, by confessing Christ, being baptized, we ask you to come forward as we stand and sing.
Thank you, Pastor. That's been Brother Jason Love. And the message this morning brought to you by the Salem Church of Christ, located at 1700 South Main Street on Highway 19 South. If you have any questions about the message this morning or about the church itself, contact Brother Jason Love at 573-729-7511. That's 573-729-7511. And listen next week at 8:15 on July 28th for our next program of the Salem Church of Christ message. At a